Hey ladies, welcome back to another of our Seamless Bible Study videos. If you're not a lady and you're watching this video, you can do what you want to do, but this video is intended for ladies and I'm not taking over at Santa Fe Baptist. We've heard from a couple guys who have watched some of the videos, and you're welcome to watch them if you're just curious, but it would kind of be like coming to the ladies' Sunday school class, and that would be awkward, don't you think? I'm just joking. But this is our ladies' Bible study class. We're not having our group Sunday school or small group Bible study or whatever you want to call it meetings in person on Sunday morning. We are meeting live on Zoom on Sunday morning instead, Sunday mornings. But I know that some of our ladies aren't able to meet at the time that we do our Zoom meetings, and some of them don't have the technology. So I choose to go ahead and add a video version of the class to YouTube. I hope that our ladies are watching it, and you're welcome to share it. Some people have mentioned sharing the videos with others, and that is totally fine. Hopefully, if you're one of those people that this video has been shared with, you are enjoying the studies and learning something or being encouraged as you go through your walk with the Lord, or if you're just curious and watching out, you're welcome to do that too. We finished last week, our first of the 6 main sections in our study that we're studying, and that is the beginning. We're just doing a summary of the Bible, and 1/6 of our study took up about 10 chapters, maybe 10 chapters. So we spent a good amount of time there, and we're just review really quickly. This little globe is for creation. This is Adam and Eve. We have the fall, Noah's Ark, and the Tower of Babel. That's what those 5 pictures stand for, the 5 steps through the first of the 6 big divisions that we're studying. And just a reminder that time-wise, Job, most Bible historians believe that Job fits into this section as well. And we did very briefly mention him in our last week's study, I think. So we're getting ready to start the next of our main sections. Getting blocked out of the shot here. We are going to talk about the patriarchs. And so the 6 pictures that go along with this are a megaphone, a name tag, the number 12, a money bag, and pyramids. And if you're familiar with the stories of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, you probably can guess what some of these pictures are referring to. I do want to just take a second and mention that patriarchs, the name of this section, the patriarchs, is just referring to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and sometimes people include Joseph in that list as the heads of the nation of Israel, the fathers of the nation. We're not using it in the sense that I think sometimes it has a negative connotation these days with patriarchal society and oppression of women and things, and you may have your opinions about the culture in which these men lived, and your opinions about today's culture, and that's not at all what this discussion is about. We're just using the word in its dictionary sense, the male head of a family or tribe, and specifically we're talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Jacob's son, Joseph. So we'll start right in our class this week on Zoom. We didn't get very far. We're only going to talk about the first icon, the megaphone, and that is referring to the calling of Abram. But before we get to that, we're just going to mention where he came from. You know that Noah, when we talked about Noah, he had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, that went on the ark with them, and all 4 of them took their wives, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and then 4 wives. So there are 8 people with a bunch of animals. And the Bible tells us in Genesis 11, verse 10, these are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And then it goes on, verses 11 through the end of the chapter really, for the most part, talk about this man lived this long and he had this kid and then he died, and then his kid lived this long and he had this kid and then he died. It's a genealogy, and it starts out with Shem, this particular one, and then toward the end of it we read that Nahor lived 9 and 20 years and begat Terah, and Nahor lived after he begat Terah 119 years and begat sons and daughters, and Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So Terah is the father of Abram, the first man that we're zooming in on in this section, Abram, and we see he came from the line of Shem. Now, what do we know about Shem? Not a lot. We do know of an interesting and a little bit frustrating account to me back in chapter 9 from Noah and his sons. After they came off the ark, we read in Genesis 9:20, Noah began to be a husbandman, which is basically another word for like a farmer or somebody who, grows stuff. I'm not a great husbandman or husbandwoman. I have my struggles with keeping things alive. But Noah started working at this after the flood, and it says he planted a vineyard and he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his 2 brethren without. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. That's the story. We do not have a lot of details. We know that Noah got drunk, possibly accidentally. The Bible doesn't tell us. We know that Ham, and it mentions that he's the father of Canaan, so one of Ham's children's names was Canaan, sees his dad drunk and naked in his tent and tells his brothers about it, and then we know that his brothers go in and cover him up without looking at him. And then the result of this, we see that Noah puts a curse on Canaan, Ham's son, and he blesses Shem and Japheth. And that's about all we know. Now, there's a lot of people who have made some, assumptions or try to surmise this or that about the story. This is why I say it's a little bit of a frustrating account, because I would like to know a little bit more explanation of, but Ham's the one who did it, but what about, why did Canaan get cursed, and what is it that he even did? He walks in and accidentally sees his dad naked. Is that such a big deal? Maybe that's not all that happened. We just don't have very many details. But we do see that in this story, Shem receives a blessing for his part in the covering up of his father, whether that was a matter of respect or what it was. And we know that Shem was one of the good guys, and Abram comes from the line of Shem, is what we know. So back to Terah. We talked about Terah being Abram's father. Genesis 11:31 tells us that Terah took Abram his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran and dwelt there. So Terah, Abram's father, starts out on a journey. He takes Abram's nephew, Lot, his brother Haran's son, and some of the names repeat. There's repeating names like grandfathers and sons, and that's common today too, so we shouldn't be surprised. But we also see Abram's brother, Haran, is the same name as the place where they end up stopping, Haran. And so whether there's a connection there, I don't know. But the fact is, they're on a journey. I've got a little map here to show you. Just so you know where we're talking about, this is the Mediterranean Sea. It's labeled there. So if you can picture this end of the Mediterranean Sea on the modern day world, Israel and Lebanon and Syria would be here. Egypt is down here, around the corner, down here. Iraq is over here. So they start out over here in Ur of the Chaldees. And they're going to Canaan, which is over here, but they are following the river, apparently, or something. I don't know. They come up this way to Haran, and this is where they stop, and Terah actually ends up dying here. So that's where they are in their journey so far. So the next verses, Genesis 12:1 reads, "The Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abraham departed, as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran." So we see that apparently God had already said something to Abram, and that's why they're leaving to go toward Canaan. But interestingly, here it says the Lord had said unto Abram, "Go away, leave this place," basically, "unto a land that I will show thee." Kind of like, go somewhere and I'll tell you where when you get there. I mentioned to our class that I felt a little bit of, I don't know what word I'm looking for, like familiarity with this kind of a thing. When we left Pensacola, when my husband graduated with his Master of Divinity, we had hoped to stay there for a little while he was looking for a church, and that just wasn't happening. So we had to move. He didn't have a job in Pensacola, and we didn't know where we were moving to. We decided that for the time being, we were going to stay with my parents. So we did have a little bit of a plan. So we stayed with my parents in Michigan for the summer and the fall there. But other than that, it was kind of like, well, we're leaving, but I don't know where we're leaving to. And now in our case, like I said, we knew we were going to Michigan for the time being. I don't know that Abraham had that much information. It doesn't really tell us. It tells us in the end of chapter 11 that they were going to Canaan, but it doesn't say that God told them specifically, go to Canaan. They just were supposed to go, and he was going to tell them. And for control-happy people like me, and like some of you I know who have commiserated with me on that, I know that sounds like, nope, definitely need more information, need a plan, need a schedule. I need to be able to, keep track, like check things off on the list as we go. And that's not the way it was from the information that we have. But we do see, along with it, we do see some blessings promised. This is the first mention of what now that we often call the Abrahamic covenant, that covenant God was going to make with Abraham, that he would bless him and make of him a great nation. And that's mentioned there in chapter 12, 2 and 3. And then verse 4 just tells us, so Abraham departed. So he did it. So he left. So he just, not having the details, not having a clue really what was going to happen or what the plan was, God told him to go, and he just got up and went. We're going to see a lot of stuff about Abraham in this study. I haven't looked ahead enough to know how super in-depth it's going to go on Abraham. But if you read the Bible at all about Abraham, you'll know that he had some problems, as do all of us. But he had also some great things said about him, and one of them is this: God said it, and he just got up and did it. And I think we could all use some more of that in our lives, whatever the situation is. If it's a move, or if it's just, I'm thinking of a funny story that I shared in class a while back about talking to somebody about the Lord, and I just felt so awkward and like, what on earth am I going to say? I don't have any lead in, I don't have anything, but I went ahead and did it, and I felt super ridiculous. But when we just, just not knowing how it's going to work out, and maybe knowing that we're going to look a little silly, we just do what the Lord says, that is a good place to be. So in verse 5, chapter 12, verse 5, we see that Abraham is still headed to Canaan. He still has Canaan in mind. He was up here in Haran. We're telling the story a little bit out of order because that's how it's given in the Bible. So he starts here, they get up here, Terah dies, and then they're here for a while, but then they continue on their path to Canaan. So they do get to Canaan, but then it says, Abraham passed through the land unto the place of Sichem to the plain of Morah, and the Canaanite was in the land. And God lets him know, I'm going to give you this land. He tells him here in verse 7, unto thy seed will I give this land. And then it says he keeps moving, he gets to Bethel, and then it says Abraham journeyed, going on still toward the south, and then it tells us there was a famine in that area, and Abram ends up in Egypt. Excuse me, I'm dropping stuff here. He ends up in Egypt, which, as I showed you on the map here, here's the region of Canaan, and he just keeps on going toward the south over this way. This is the Negev Desert, and this is Egypt down here, and that's where he ends up. That seems to be something that people did. We read that more than once in the Bible about famines and people ending up in Egypt. And that's what Abraham did. Abram, I should say, because he's still called Abram here. And an interesting story, and an interesting story comes next. And I want to point out, as I've pointed out before, that not everything that the Bible says happened is necessarily a recommendation that you go and do thou likewise. That's not why the Bible tells us everything that it tells us. It's just telling us facts that happened. So we see Abram getting near to Egypt, and he tells his wife, Sarai, as she is called at the time, chapter 12, verse 11, it says, it came to pass when he was come near to enter into Egypt that he said unto Sarai his wife, behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Basically, she's really pretty. Therefore it shall come to pass when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. So basically he asks Sarai to lie and say, no, we're not husband and wife, we're brother and sister, because he's afraid that they'll see how beautiful his wife is and want her, and kill him. Now, again, another story where we're not given everything that's going through Abram and Sarai's mind. Like, okay, well, they might kill you, but if they think that she's available, won't they just try to marry her? Doesn't that bother you too? Or, like, I don't know. You just read the story and you're like, all right. Needless to say, Abram's plan doesn't go super well. They do go ahead and tell the story that they're brother and wife, but he's right. Pharaoh, the leader of Egypt, really thinks Sarai is gorgeous and wants to take her for one of his many wives. And it says that the Lord plagued Pharaoh in his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Somehow Pharaoh figures out what's going on, and he calls Abram and is like, what have you done to me? You guys get out of here. So they kick them out of Egypt, and that's that. That's Egypt. They were in Egypt. I do want to mention that according to Genesis 20, verse 12, this is Abraham talking about his wife, and it says, yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. I don't know if this makes the story better or worse, that when they sort of lied about her being his sister, they actually were sort of telling the truth. She was his half-sister, and she was also his wife. And whatever your thoughts on that are, I guess we'll say the same thing as what we said about where did Cain get his wife? Where did all those other people get their wives? Well, when there weren't very many choices, they married siblings. And the reasons that we don't marry siblings today, aside from, ew, that's so gross, the genetic mutations and things did not exist that far back in history. So at least there's that. I don't know if you feel like that makes the story better or worse, but they were half brother and sister, but they still weren't telling the whole truth, and it didn't work out very well for them. The last little section we're going to mention quickly here is about Abram's family member, his nephew Lot. They're back in the region of Canaan, and after they get kicked out of Egypt, they get a lot of, animals, and they're increasing in size, their tribes or whatever. And so Abram and Lot decide to split up. Lot goes to live in Sodom, which is a very wicked city, known for its wickedness in that area. And Abram lives elsewhere, the opposite direction. And God decides he's going to judge Sodom for its wickedness. He decides he's actually going to destroy it. He's going to destroy the city. And so through a series of events, Abram is asking God, will you spare the city of Sodom, knowing that Lot's living there? Will you spare it if there's 40 righteous people? What about if there's 30 righteous people? What if there's 20? He gets down to 10, and I'm pretty sure 10 is as low as he goes, as he's kind of bargaining with God to not destroy the city if there's some righteous people there. Maybe his thinking was, my nephew Lot is righteous, and surely he will have influenced enough people that there's 10 good guys in the city, and so God will spare it. He won't destroy the city. Well, he was wrong. Apparently there were not 10 good people in the city, and we know that not even all of Lot's children were considered righteous or were concerned at all with the evil state of the city from the story. God ends up having to send angels to get Lot and his family out of the city. That's a whole another story there that you can read about in Genesis 19. If you're more interested in all that story, we're just kind of skimming over it. But what we do know is that Lot, his wife, and their 2 daughters are basically physically removed from the city by these angels. Lot's wife is not too pleased, and she ends up looking back as God's destroying it, and she turns into a pillar of salt. That is a pretty common reference, I think, for most people, Lot's wife and the pillar of salt. But according to Genesis 19, what happens next is not any better. You might be waiting for when it gets better. But starting in verses, let's see. Verse 30, Genesis 19, verse 30. It says, Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar. And he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. So his wife had come out with them, but she's now salt. So it's just him and his daughters. And the firstborn said unto the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. So apparently the destruction of the city they had come from was big enough that they thought they were the only people left alive. At least that's what they said. Whether they were sincere in saying that, we don't know, but that's what the older daughter claims. And her plan is, well, it's only us, so we need to get pregnant by our father so that we can have some kids and then the human race can continue. What? I don't know. You're just like, okay, this is what? And we see again a second mention of being drunk. They realize they're going to need to get their father drunk for this to happen, and so they do. And the story goes on to basically tell us they're both successful. They both successfully get pregnant by their father. Like I said, this is not a recommendation. This is a recording of what happened. The Bible is at times pretty blunt about the messed up ways in that people live. And I think it's just good to remember that it's not only our time where there's a lot of weird stuff going on. That's just part of human nature. Verse 36 says, Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. And the firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab, the same as the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son and called his name Ben-Ammi, the same as the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. Those names might not mean much to you at this point, but they will come back. We will hear about the Moabites and the Ammonites many times, and this is where they came from. Lot, Abram's nephew, and his daughters, and the 2 families that came from the 2 girls being impregnated by their father by their own twisted design, results in 2 nations that are going to appear in the story, and you'll see them again. This is as far as we got. We didn't even quite finish that first little picture, the megaphone, but we'll see how far we get next time. So hopefully this is all kind of lining up in your head a little bit. I'll just show you the graphic again we've got the beginning, and we're on the patriarchs now. So this is the first main section, the beginning, and then we're right here on the megaphone with the patriarchs, and we're still talking about the call of Abram. Hopefully next week we'll finish up the call and talk about the name tag and what that means, what that's referring to. But I'm really glad you're joining us. And if you have any questions, comments, thrown fruit, my old principal in high school used to say, questions, comments, thrown fruit. If you have any rotten fruit you want to throw, I'll give you my husband's number and you can talk to him. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll hopefully have another video up next week with the next section of the lessons. Have a great one.